Hello and welcome to CEOs Get Real. I'm your host, Christopher Marston, and today we have Stu Lerner of the Lerner Project. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Awesome. Well, let's do a cheers here first because you got some, I'm always drinking wine on the show, but this is your wine.
This is our wine. This is our 2017 Lerner Project Oakville Cabernet. 85% Cabernet from the Oakville Tench Vineyard, backs up to Screaming Eagle, and 15% of it is a combination of, actually it's 15% Merlot from Sugarloaf Mountain in South Napa.
Wow, I love it. We're going to talk about the love that went into this. Cheers.
Absolutely.
I'm going to appreciate this. Normally I would just drink it, but this is Stu's wine, so I'm going to. Wow. Stu, that's amazing.
It's a young one. We just we bottled this a year ago, and this wine here, luckily for my wife Karen and I, we have a business partner who's also our winemaker, Russell Bevan, and Russell is a Robert Parker Winemaker of the Year Award winner in 2015, and he's posted more 100-point scores than anybody in the world since 2011. He's had 11 100-point scores. And I know Russell because I'm a wine collector, and I've always had a passion for Russell's wines.
And so you just acquired Russell at some point. You said Russell.
We, at some point in time, I decided that, my passion, someday I'd love to be in the wine business. I like to work with my hands. I like to work, the idea of working with the fruit in the vineyards, and the crush has always been fun to watch. Didn't realize how difficult it really is to do until you do it.
I love that. Well, we're going to go and talk about how you got where you are, but I just want to comment that, I mean, it really is rich and full of flavor, and I could tell it's got some time left in it. I'm a collector as well, so Stu was telling me that well, it's kind of young. These things are drinkable right out, which there's no doubt. This was fabulous. Just on the palate, it was full, and normally I'd go into a tasting and talk to you about what I'm tasting, but we don't need to do the wine ink blot test here.
Well, Russell, the one fortunate thing about Russell did not go to wine school. He's kind of learned everything he can, like the rest of us, and studied it hard enough, and actually wrote an article for the Minneapolis Star years ago when he was selling dental products throughout the U.S., and just really got involved in it and decided that he wanted to go with his passion. So Russell is not schooled for it, so he's a freelancer. And so, like in 2011, he was the only winemaker in the world to score a 100-point wine.
Wow.
Which was a very difficult year in Napa Valley. So it's been really great to watch Russell, how he's been able to spread his wings in the difficult years, because he doesn't follow the book. Yeah. He usually shines even more. And he's always had the luxury of having lots of friends who are winemakers and learning their styles and their techniques and taking the best practices of everybody. And as a wine collector, I've always been fascinated how his wines always are so approachable from day one. Some winemakers may say, hey, sit on this for 3 or 5 years, it needs to open up. Russell's wines will be approachable from day one, and they will last 20 to 30 years.
Yeah. How many wines do you have?
So in 2017, our second vintage, we started in 2016 with our first vintage. We had 4 red Bordeaux Cabernet styles and 1 Sauvignon Blanc that we've done. And the volume was around 1,100 cases combined between them.
Okay. And what got you into this business?
Well, back in 1983, I was in the wooden pallet business, and
like shipping pallets.
Shipping pallets, and
you went for the sexiest thing, right?
I was
going for pallets.
I went for the necessary evil.
Okay, there you go.
And a buyer's guide, right? A purchasing agent, and the territories I had were Sonoma and Napa County, and so I would go and visit the wineries and My first order I ever got came from Robert Mondavi himself before he sold it to Constellation. And so my first PO in the pallet industry was from Robert Mondavi himself.
No kidding.
And so after every visit in a selling, everybody would say, hey, do you want to go down and try some of our wine in the tasting room? Well, 5 or 6 visits a day, you know, that was a lot of wine consumption, having fun doing it. But
so when was this?
this was in 1983 when I first started in the pallet industry.
So were you in the pallet industry a long time?
I retired from the pallet industry in 2014.
No kidding.
Yeah.
30 years then.
30 years.
That's amazing. So you must have been an amazing salesman.
You know, it went from that into opening my own business in '87, actually with my wife's dad, Donald Meneghetti, and we had a business called L&M Pallet. Okay. It was Lerner and Meneghetti. We just figured that people would struggle with the Meneghetti name, so we went with the L&M. And so from '87 to 94, he was in the business, then we sold that business. And then from there I just went on and had been manufacturing recycling pallets for the largest rental leasing company in the world, a company called Shep USA.
Huh. So when you were in the pallet business and you were doing business with Robert Mondavi, did you actually meet him at that time?
Oh yeah, he personally gave me the PO.
So, but Mondavi was a name back then. I mean,
Robert Mondavi, for a guy that grew up in Southern California, whose family did not drink wine, and moving up to Northern California, you know, I kind of like the white wines because they were cold, and I grew up in Southern California where it was hot. Who would want to drink something that's not from cold? So I kind of stayed away from the red wines, but the white wines were, they were good. And it wasn't until I went to Robert Mondavi's 65th birthday party, I got invited because some of the vendors got invited, that I was sitting at a table, and one of the other vendors who I did not know asked me, hey, have you tried the red wine yet? And I said, I don't drink red wine. He says, well, you need to start drinking this because it's free tonight and you won't have a chance to drink this anymore. I said, well, okay, so I drank it and I really liked it, and it was Opus 1. So that was the first red wine that I actually have had.
So you've been spoiled ever since.
I have been spoiled ever since. And my wife and her family really didn't drink red wine. They drank Italian family. Up until one day, right before we were getting married, one of the big houses, wine houses in Napa, Vineyards, they go by BV. You'll see that on the labels.
I thought it was Beaulieu.
And Bob Branch, who was he was the wine master. He'd been there for 35 years, and he kind of looked at me as a grandson, and because I'd come sell him pallets, and he said, "Hey, for your wedding present, I go out and pick out a bottle of whatever you want from the cellar." So he gave me the old cellar keys, like I was like in a jail cell. So I went in there and I picked out a bottle. I knew nothing about red wine. I picked out a bottle.
That's why he felt comfortable. He's like, yeah, you'll probably.
I went out and I picked out a bottle, and it was a 1964 George Latour. Oh, and I said, well, he goes, what a great year. How did you know? I said, I had no idea. So I went home that night and I said, Karen, look what Bob's given us for our wedding present. It was a 1964 George Latour. And Karen says, well, you know, I don't like red wine. I said, oh. And her dad said, well, Stu, you and I will drink that bottle tonight. So we drank the bottle ourselves.
That's an amazing story. So you're telling me that in that time, as big as Mondavi was, he personally was meeting with the person who sold him pallets?
Absolutely.
Was that a value that he held particularly? I mean, he was big enough to where other people in his organization could buy pallets.
It wasn't long after that he had other people doing those, doing the roles as purchasing agent and stuff.
Okay.
Robert Mondavi was one of those ones. He was a face that everybody saw, and he was involved in a lot of different aspects of the business.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So you sold the pallets business, and you went on and you retired from it in 2014, did you say?
2014.
Okay. Is that when your wine time, you had this in your mind, right? It would always be nice to be in the wine business?
I really wanted to do it in 2008 when the recession hit, because it
Perfect
was
timing, right?
it was a great timing. But it wasn't a good timing for us in the business because we were expanding the businesses. We had been running, we ran 8 different states for the rental leasing company, both in manufacturing and recycling. It just wasn't the right time. Wish it was, because the land values were a lot cheaper than when we purchased the Armstrong Ranch here in 2017.
And so Lerner Project it has different properties then?
Lerner Project owns one estate. It's up in Diamond Mountain. We bought it in 2017, 4 months before the big fires.
Oh, wow.
And we survived it. My wife kept asking me, are you sure this was a good investment?
During the fires or after?
During the fires.
Right.
And it's just a remarkable property. It was planted in 1983. Original vines, a Clone 6 Cabernet, very unheard of. Probably 1 or 2 vineyards left in the mountaintops of Napa that have the old vintage like we have. The family, Tom and Jane Byrne, her maiden name was Armstrong. She was a big figure in the grocery industry. And a lot of stuff on the back of the labels today are still what Jane had done. But one of her greatest claims was she was also a magnificent chef from Chicago. She cooked at the White House for 3 different presidents. Right. And so when we were buying the place, they were in their mid-80s, and they were timed out on managing the ranch. It's at an elevation of 1,400 feet. With grades of 65 degrees, so it was built as of old, like if you were in Portugal or Spain, how the terraces are done. And it was designed and done by the famous Dick Stelzer, who made his claim in Stag's Leap Valley with Nathan Fay from Stag's Leap. And so he actually was the one who foresaw this, what it could turn out to be, and the Byrnes went ahead with it. So they came out from Chicago after it was built and actually resided on the property, and in 1983 built their house there in 1993.
What a story. So many wineries have a story like that, don't they?
Oh.
The rich history.
It's, when you have a website or anything, or when you meet the owners, or you're having a tasting, it's all about the story. How did everybody get started, and why they wanted to get in the wine business.
So it's interesting because we have clients in the wine business, and in all spectrums, from the newer generation and different types of wines that they want to make as a newer generation, to happy hour wine, which is really focused on consistency of taste, a non-vintage wine, sort of like a non-vintage port, but something that everybody can count on is going to taste good every day. And then, of course, there's the stuff I like that's ageable and complex. How did you decide when you bought the property and decided to do this, where you were going to be in the spectrum of the wine business?
Well, it was important to me because I've collected wine, and I have over 6,000 bottles of my own collection. And I would say 95% of it is red wine, 5% is white wine. Yeah. That we would try to make the best wine in the world. That was the goal. I've bought wine from every area in the world, and my favorites are Napa Valley Cabernets. There's a lot of great winemakers in Napa Valley. I tended to go with Russell. I thought Russell can make some changes that I felt that others might not want to do. And I think Russell saw my passion and how hard I work and what I really want to accomplish. He knows my taste buds. But that was the goal, is if I was going to get in the business, try to make a wine that I want to buy. Right. And I think I've done that.
Well, you made a wine I want to buy, so
well, good.
it's good.
We can make that happen.
The taste is amazing. That's great. Well, the one thing I was curious about is a lot of people think winery, it's kind of like alcohol, some of the alcohol businesses like vodka brands, they're a bit of a badge, right, for famous people to get into. And naturally, you must see some of this, right?
Oh,
You know,
it's all over
the
Napa
place.
Valley.
Yeah.
All over Napa Valley.
How is that perceived in the Valley? Is that a different group of people that's more trend chasing? Are they still mingling with the same crowds? Because it seems like a very different aesthetic and motivation.
Well, I think today there's two types of wine businesses. One that's trying to make money, and others that are not trying to lose money. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I think what you see, because there are a lot of famous people that are in Napa Valley that were in sports or entertainment, that love the passion of, or the idea about having their own wine brand, but really don't work it themselves. They hire other people to do it. My feeling is, why I got in the business is I wanted to work it. My wife said, so tell me this isn't going to be a hobby. I said, no, this isn't going to be a hobby. This is going to be a business. I want to make wine that people want to drink, but can afford to drink it. Yeah. That's kind of where we're today, where we're at. I think the industry itself is changing because the pricing has gotten so high that what they're missing out is people able to even try the wine because of the price point.
So tell me about that. I've noticed the price points go crazy. I mean, I have about 1,000 bottles. I've been collecting since I was 18, before I could legally drink it. And so I had to study all the different wineries and learn about them, from Farniente to Stag's Leap to Kunde. What is it? Kunde? Kunde. I mean, it goes on, right? Oakville and BV, I know, and 100 more, right?
Yes.
Camus is good, and I've just watched and admired their stories and how they crafted the wines, and things have changed. It used to be about the complexity and longevity, and now it seems about more the quick hit and ready today. I find it harder today than I ever find it to find something that's ageable. I don't know if this is something you're finding, but as a consumer, I think finding something that you could put away for a while has been more difficult to find.
Well, in Napa, especially in Napa, because the vineyards are everything. Russell would say 90% of it's the soil, 10% is the winemaker. In a difficult year, because of weather or late rains or fires, then the winemaker has a lot more to do with it. Then it changes it maybe to 60-40. But without good soil, you're not going to make long-lasting wine. And so you're always looking for those A vineyards. And that's what we specialize in. And every vineyard that we get our fruit from outside of our own ranch, we consider A vineyards. So we have a chance to make the best wine.
Okay, and there's a hierarchy in the wine business, right, to where you get the wines and where that soil is, and everybody kind of knows. What's driven the prices up over the years?
Well, the land itself has been the number one driver. That finding those vineyards, there's a very high demand, and a lot of people's brands want to have at least one of those wines on their portfolio because it helps sell the rest of their wines where they make their money. They're willing to put that brand item on their portfolio to help them sell the other wines. They won't make money on that brand, or a very little, but they're going to make their profit because that one label is going to help them move the other wines.
Is that because of brand awareness, or what is it about it that moves the other wines?
Well, back in 2015, before 2015, I would say Robert Parker moved the needle. Robert Parker was the wine critic that worldwide acclaimed and respected. If Robert Parker said this was a 100-point wine, you would sell hundreds of cases just from that. Today, the needle maybe moves 5 or 10 cases. if you got a 100-point score. There's multiple wine critics now, all trying to develop their own clientele list. There's different magazines. Now we're at one point in time, probably two that you're aware of. And that was Wine
Spectator, of course.
And Wine Advocate.
Yep, that's right.
But there's others now. And the other critics, some of them are fantastic in some areas of the world. And
then you get Cellar Tracker and the sort of community-sourced reviewers, right?
Yes.
Which are part of, more to community style of review, which is happening these days. When you got into this, though, you said you wanted to be hands-on. How hands-on are you? What is a day in the life of Stu at the winery?
Well, in about another month, my wife sees me for about 5 hours because I run the processing line at the winery for the crush. And not just for the stuff of our fruit that goes through, but for all the other people in the winery. And that's probably around 400 to 450 tons of fruit coming through. Most of the varietals are red varietals from Cabernet to Merlot to Cab Franc, some Pinot, some Petit Verdot, and some Zinfandel. But typically, I can literally say that every bottle that went through there I touched in some way. I'm always out in the vineyard looking around, making sure that everything's good. We have a vineyard management company and a wine vineyard consultant who is world famous, Tom Prentice. And they manage the property, but we have someone there every week, and I get reports every week, so I'm actually able to go out and see exactly the reports and what we need to do. With Russell, I'm constantly having blending sessions, talking about the wines, what we need to do to make sure that we're on path. And I have two new hires that we've hired, an estate director, Bridget Babb, and our vice president of sales, Ron Hatley. And so we're actually pushing the brand with their experience. Between the two of them, they have over 30 years experience in the wine industry dealing with, as we consider the higher end wine connoisseurs.
So getting into this business wasn't just nostalgic. It was partly a lot of people look at wine and they romanticize what it's like to have a winery. But then I have friends in this business who say it's farming. And if you're getting into this, you gotta like farming because you're gonna be doing what farmers do.
Yes, and I would say that in our first year that we just bought fruit from other vineyards. Mm-hmm. There was less of that. Yes, we went to the vineyards, we walked around and make sure everything was doing what it was supposed to do. But since we bought the property, more of a hands-on approach. It's our vineyard, it's our estate wine. So that's something that we focus a lot on. And I'm learning every day. I mean, as much as I would like to say I know about wine, I didn't know very much about vineyard and vineyard management and what we need to do at certain times of the year.
So it's still early days, Stu.
Very early days.
So what are the biggest things you've learned so far?
To listen to the vineyard management company and follow Russell's lead.
All right, that's something.
Yes.
So it sounds like the pallet business did well for you over the years.
Yes, we were a very, very large pallet company. We had over 700 employees in 7 states.
But you started that company?
I started a company before with my father-in-law back in L&M. And then when he retired, I opened up, I was recruited by this rental leasing company, and I started a company called Blue Chip, and we had multiple LLCs throughout the country. We manufactured in South Haven, Mississippi. Okay. We actually manufactured, we were the largest wood source user in the US for 3 consecutive years.
Wow.
We would go through 46 rail cars of lumber a day. Just manufacturing pallets for the leasing company.
No kidding. Wow. So you grew this business. What do you attribute the success in that business to?
Hard work and listening to the people that work with you. I've never considered people working for me, they work with me. And so when you have that many people in that many states, I had my wife who was always there doing the accounting for us and kind of leaning us in the right direction on that end of it, but had some really fine managers that were able to share in the successes that we were able to do, and treated a workforce where our workers' compensation, our injury rate was near zero in a very intense environment. Set records in many aspects in the for our customer in terms of production levels, safety, training, just across the board.
Wow, that's impressive. So they say behind every great man is a great woman. So what's, you know, I hear that she was in the business, at least keeping an eye on things. What role did that play for you, and how pivotal or not was that?
Well, Karen came from a family that was all CPAs.
Okay.
And so even though she was a computer programmer, MIS major in college, she still had some of those tracks of the CPA end of it. And Karen, she probably wouldn't like me to say this, but she's a cancer survivor and early in marriage. And so for the first few months of our marriage, while she was getting her chemo and radiation, I handled the checking book. And I'm one of those people that like to do everything in your head. So for 2 months, I kept the checking book in my head. And of course, she didn't grow up that way. And so when at some point in time, she said, you know, even though you're almost correct in 2 months, you're done, or I'm taking over. And that was kind of how everything went with the businesses. I just
Okay,
allowed her
great.
to
be precisely
be
right.
precise, but she's my best friend in life, and you know, we kind of bounce a lot of things off, and it's worked for us.
How long have you been married?
We will be 36 in December.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. What's the secret?
The secret is being truthful and caring, and you know, never want to disappoint anybody.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
You got kids?
We have two adult sons. One's 32, lives in Eastern Oregon, and one's lives in the city. He's 28 in San Francisco.
Congratulations.
Yes, we're very lucky.
So what do they think about the business, the family business?
Well, they've been around the palate business for a long time until they got out of college, and with the wine business, they both help out. Our youngest son, who works for Google, does our social media, so our Facebook and Instagram, and then our oldest son is a high tech. He has a business called Switchboard that he's kind of stepped aside of right now, but he's handling our website design, and he's very talented at doing that.
Wow.
So trying to get him more involved in it. My younger one, I think, has a passion. I think at some point in time, that's the direction he's want to go into the wine business.
So you think one of them likes wine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Scott loves wine.
So you grew up, we were talking before the show about common sense and the role of just the common sense North Star that seems to be missing these days. Maybe you could elaborate on that one.
Well, I really think today that's an element that we're all missing, is the common sense side of it, of business approach, decisions. Where we're at in business today, you know, most of the decisions I make today were based on common sense decisions I made many years ago, and you follow that line of thinking. Today, kids, I can't speak for most, but for a lot, the computers, it's not let their mind run free and not have to make decisions because computer will make the decision for them. That I think that's an element that for starting new businesses, it will slow the progress down. There will always be new businesses with new minds and everything, but I think there's a lot more that could be done. And I'm not sure what the answer for that is, but I think the common sense, the richest people in the world today are people who have survived on common sense and not education.
Yeah. Do you think we're headed in that direction? We hear the talk about skills-based economy becoming more important, in the institution becoming less important. I mean, everybody's got massively educated and massively in debt doing so, and not seeing the return on investment and being buried in student debt in the process. So do you see that headed back in the direction of common sense?
Well, you know, when I was in high school, that was a long time ago, 50% of the people in my high school went to college, and 50%, most of them went into trade school. And you know, if anybody's had anybody working at their house and trying to get an electrician and a plumber, they're so hard to get today.
Sure.
Because all those people who could have gone into trade school, who could be making well over $100,000 with a trade school degree today, if not own a business and make a lot more, now went to college, and some of those people are working at McDonald's because they can't find jobs. Could be talented people, but there's just not enough jobs out there.
Yeah. I used to. We were talking earlier. I used to compete in ballroom dance, and one of my instructors was a Harvard graduate in women's studies. Couldn't find a job, so she was a dancer. And lovely, actually, perfectly lovely, but not in women's studies. She wasn't in that field. But I'm seeing more and more companies appreciating talent when they see it, that has a good gut and a work ethic, more than somebody that's got a degree coupled with entitlement of some kind. So at least I'm seeing that kind of shift in the workforce. Yeah.
I agree. You know, if you're lucky enough, you know, in the sales world, it's all about the 10%ers. You know, can you get a 10%er, and if you can, how do you keep them, right? Because everybody's looking for that 10%er.
Yeah, that's
who
right.
just sells 90% of the sales.
Yeah.
And so I always consider myself that person. I would imagine you consider yourself that person. So that's why you work for yourself today, and I work for myself today, right? Because it's hard when you're working for somebody else, when you see, hey, I should be doing this. If I ever have an opportunity, this is how I would do it.
Yeah. Well, you're still rolling up your sleeves. So clearly, being in the wine business wasn't a badge of honor for you. It's yet another job, but it's something you're passionate about. So you could have retired, right?
Oh, I did retire, and as my wife
So you call this retirement, right?
It was just a matter of time before I wanted to do something else. I just have to be doing something. And this was a passion. And so this wasn't about making a lot of money. This was about doing my passion, not losing the money that we made, but to try to do something that I could say I accomplished my goal.
Yeah. So Stu, you have 6,000 bottles. Did I get that right?
Oh, yes.
I have 1,000. And every once in a while, I'll do a calculation of my consumption rate and figure out whether I can drink enough of the aged stuff before it gets over the hill. Have some form of a guilt around that because I don't drink alone, because you don't want to open an aged bottle alone, right? And then you sort of got to ask yourself, which is why I have to buy ageable wine, because if I buy something I can drink now, then there's an opportunity cost, right? I'm getting something else is going over the hill while I'm drinking today's thing. So you have 6,000 bottles. Did it ever occur to you that you're working on today's passion, and how are you going to drink the 6,000 you have?
Good question. When my kids were younger, they told me that, hey, Dad, when you leave, this is all on eBay.
It's all on eBay.
But
thanks, kids.
Karen said, no, that's not going to happen. I get the wine next. But it's hers too. So we like to entertain, and we like to open up bottles of wine. And it's a nice way of expressing. I think why I love the wine industry so much is when you come to Napa Valley or Sonoma Valley or go travel across the country and you're drinking wine, you're always happy.
Isn't that right? Isn't that right? You can't be angry. I have two things I say to my wife. When you're drinking wine and when you're eating ice cream, you just can't be angry in either of those events. You can't. And if you start drinking wine together or you start eating ice cream, you're just going to, your mood will change.
And there's a lot of wineries that don't have good self-service, so you don't have to worry about work. All you have to do is worry about what you're drinking.
I love that. That's amazing.
So.
Well, Stu, I've only known you a little bit. First of all, what's your end game with Lerner? Where are you going with this?
The end game is to develop a brand that when people can associate with and say, that is a very great bottle of wine, and I was able to try that wine, or I have that wine in my cellar, or I want to get that wine.
So what is it about you that creates that desire for a connection to the consumer? Is it because your passion and love went into it?
I have drive. I have a drive and the passion to try to, I'm never going to stop until I get to that point. And I'm lucky enough that I have my partner and winemaker, Russell Bevan, who's the same. After every time he gets a 100-point score, how am I going to get 101? I mean, it's his passion that he wants to keep doing better. He doesn't want somebody to say, hey, Russell, you remember when you used to make that wine that was really good?
Right.
He couldn't live with himself by hearing that. So no matter how good he does, he wants to do better. I'm the same way in everything that I do. I want to create something that consistently gets better. That's why it's the project. The project is to keep getting better at everything.
There's something in the name. There's something in the name. You know, there's a saying about why, you know, doctors practice medicine rather than just do it. You know, not that you want people practicing on you. That's a whole other thing. But I totally get that. That's great. So you know, you want to, I mean, and to acknowledge. So is that living for you? Is that what living means for you? Being alive? Is it constantly evolving and getting better? There's something to that, Stu.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, I've been married for 35 and a half years now, and that, you know, we constantly are growing, my wife and I, and we're growing in the same direction. We've created not just a great family and friendships with our friends, but where we want to envision, what we want to leave behind. My wife runs a foundation that we've been able to give back to Stanford and other places because, you know, what she has gone through in terms of being a survivor of cancer. Yeah. And that's always been something that we've wanted to give back to society. We also, you know, I coached high school baseball for many years, enjoyed that, enjoyed the kids. They're all adults now, and they all call me by first name basis, which is a little different than coach. So, you know, I'm always trying to reach out and improve everything we do. I try to be a better husband, a better father.
So what's with that? Did you learn that somewhere?
Oh, my dad.
From your dad?
Yeah.
So your dad was a role model in how to be a role model?
Yep, absolutely.
That's fabulous.
Yep.
We don't hear enough of that these days.
Yeah, well, you know, it's, my two best friends were my dad and my father-in-law.
Wow.
You know,
your father-in-law?
Yeah, we had a business together, L&M
Yeah,
Talent.
that's right.
And so I learned so much from him, and he had 4 daughters, so, you know, he was waiting for the girls to get married so he can finally have boys.
And you passed the test with an Italian
I
father-in-law.
passed the test. He showed me the closet where the shotgun was.
That's right.
So I was one of 2 of the 4 that were shown the closet. So where the shotgun was. So I think
the other 2 didn't make it out.
Yeah, he was probably a little more nervous with me and my other brother-in-law, but it was. I learned so much from him in life, in a business, and how to take care of family. It was remarkable. He was a remarkable man.
So Stu, you were talking about family. What has been the role of family, if you could weigh it, in business or your ability to focus or succeed in business?
Well, I came from a very strong family. My parents were married, I think, 56 years before my dad passed away.
Did they tell you their secret?
Well, you know, as my wife said, it was always a circus at the house, and she would always, the first time she met, she goes, honey, I think your parents are not going to make it. And I said, well, that's the way they communicate.
That's great.
And so we always called them the circus, right? But they loved each other. It's just, it was loud. And it was fun growing up. I was fortunate enough to meet Karen's family. Fantastic family.
But she had the Italian family.
She had the Italian.
They thought yours was loud.
They thought mine was loud.
That's great.
And so getting to spend time with her family and getting close with her parents. Her dad became a mentor to me, and he had the one area of business I didn't have a lot of experiences, and that was the financial side of it. I could operate stuff, I could sell, but you know, in the old days, my friends that were in construction out of high school, they'd make a lot of money. What'd they do? They go buy a boat, or they bought an RV. Okay. My father-in-law was the teacher of, look, we're gonna need that money for a rainy day. Someday you'll be able to buy whatever you want to buy, but you have to learn that there are going to be hiccups in business, and will you be able to survive it? And so it was teachings like that, and he also loved to work with his hands, so he wasn't just a financial guy. He got out there and worked, because that's who he was. You know, he loved to grow vegetables and fruit. His gardens were always plentiful. He just loved to be involved. I'm so sad that he couldn't be part of the wine. He had passed away before we opened up the wine business, because he'd be up there every day.
No kidding.
He would be there every day.
Wow, what a beautiful story. Stu, I appreciate your sharing that, by the way.
Yeah,
that's really important.
Well, it's important to me that people realize that, you know, you can have all the money you want. You can be the richest guy in the world, but, you know, you can't take it with you, right? So we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of great, our kids, we have a lot of great nephews and nieces, and now we have, some of them have their own kids now, and all we can do is show, you know, pass that on of how family, you know, you got to keep the family going, you know, and so now our kids' generation know that it's in their hands now. And we've done a lot of family vacations where we get 18 or more people coming and traveling around the world, and it's something that the earlier we can expose people to it, being with the family, they want to be with family. We do a lot of events where you would think that the younger generation will want to go out with their friend. No, they want to come and be at the events with us, because everybody gets along so well and roots for everybody. There's no negative vibe in the family. Amazing.
That sounds like you've got a special sauce there. I'm not sure if it's patented, but if you know the secret to that, let me know. A lot of people want to know.
Luckily married into a family that was, as I look at A soil vineyards, I got into an A family.
A family. I love it. Amen to that. Well, Stu, you've known about us a little bit, and you've had a chance through some of our senior colleagues, even across the country. That's how I met you, was in Knoxville, one of our team members in Knoxville. What's your impression of what we do, just knowing a little bit that you know?
I think what you're accomplishing right now, getting word out and getting exposure of different businesses and different techniques that people have used. I've watched some of your videos of how well-rounded people are. Some people are more educational than others. Some people are more, driven from common sense. I like the idea of what your content and what you're trying to accomplish is open the eyes of many others who have dreamed of having their own business or are starting a new business. of things that have worked for other people, things that haven't worked for other people. So it's not having to make possibly one mistake that you would have made that could have really hurt you during that process.
And you mentioned, Stu, over the years, the pain of the billable hour.
I've, being a
Not to get PTSD.
Being a successful entrepreneur, you have to have attorneys. That there's always things that come up, and I really like your idea of not having billable hours. My wife and I surely have spent our billable hours, and how they change with one attorney to another.
Oh yeah.
And how they really change when you're in big areas in downtown Miami versus Olive Branch, Mississippi. Okay?
Yep, the geography matters.
But what I've learned, we've been fortunate. We've had some very good attorneys at the advice of my brother, who's an attorney, who has always led us in the right direction. Right. And has given my wife and I and our other business partners the foresight of, the goods and bads of what we were dealing with. But what I've read and what I've heard, what you're aspiring to do would be, to me, as if I'm doing business with a business versus an attorney firm.
Yeah. And most people come back from drinks and don't feel like they had drinks with an attorney, and they mean it as a compliment.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think the idea of running a firm that is more of a business, and a business approach. How would you deal with a business? I don't call my bottle supplier and tell him, hey, I'm going to charge you by the hour.
Right.
For he's going to charge me by what the bottles cost.
That's right.
And so if you can change the model of that industry over to something like that, I think it would be, one, more successful. Yeah. Two, you would have clients for life.
Yeah, that's right.
And not just for attorney. You'd be consulting them for everything that you do.
That's right.
From insurance to anything else, because you wouldn't be having to worry about, well, they're charging me $450 for this hour if I call them up.
That'd be a cheap hour too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. The clients for life, the relationships for life. And in your generation too, that concept was more prevalent of true trusted advisor relationships. And in the next generation, it's become more transactional, which is a shame because people do crave. We still need relationships. We still want them.
Well, I come from old school. My dad always taught me, look somebody in the eye, shake their hand, and have a deal. Okay? Right. And I've done that my whole life. Now, my brother has always advised me, Stu, you can't do that anymore. Yeah. You can, but there's a consequence that goes with it. Yeah. So that's what's changed. To me, if you and I have a deal and we shake on it,
you just don't forget your deal.
It's all about integrity, right?
That's right.
If you have the integrity that you're going to follow through with what you said you were going to do, then you do it. If there's going to be a change, then you talk about it. And you work it out? But you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
It's sad. Well, I tend to think it's still out there, but it's a rare breed now. It's a rare breed. Well, thanks for sharing that. Are you ready to get real?
Let's get real.
All right, let's toast to that. Toast to that. All right. So we're in a COVID economy, and who knows, years later somebody's going to watch this and it won't be. So we don't need to make it at a timestamp. But you'd mentioned something about your sky deck and adapting to the times, because so much of the wine industry is driven by people that come from other places to see that. So how are you adapting?
Well, Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley have, for wine tastings, have opened it up through COVID guidelines. You can do outdoor tastings in small gatherings. And so what's happened, and we all know the restaurants now are doing outdoor dining, a lot of the wineries and restaurants were all fighting for umbrellas. And so, try to find an umbrella stand, try to find an umbrella
to
be able to do outdoor, because in the summer months,
hot.
You know, we're 100 degrees right now, and you know, you can't put somebody drinking wine in 100-degree heat. The same thing with eating in a restaurant. And so I think what's going to happen, you know, is now we have to think about winter. We have to think 2.5 months down the road right now. What are we going to do if COVID is still in place and we can only do outdoor tastings, and restaurants thinking the same thing, outdoor dining? How are we going to make this to where we can successfully give them the experience that they want?
And how important, I mean, you also have the risk, though, people just aren't traveling out of their own fears unto itself. Forget about where you put them, right? The volume of people who are willing to travel.
So right now, Napa Valley, the majority of the people that are coming to Napa Valley today are locals. People from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, you know, probably 2-hour drive, and they're coming up for the day. The hotels, there are some hotels open, but there's not a lot. Restaurants, unless you have outdoor seating, you know, we just heard the French Laundry finally opened up outside. They have an outdoor seating, but you know, how do you still keep that 2 or 3 Michelin star? Now you're going to be outside in the elements.
That's true. That's a good point, right? And people worry about where they're going to stay and where they're going to eat. Basic things that they never had to think about before, like eating.
So we've been fortunate. We've had we did a Texas and Florida wine tour earlier in the year, and we have a lot of some of those clients coming out from Texas and Florida that either have private planes or just have been careful to come out because they need to get away from where they're at. I mean, you don't want to be in Dallas right now where it's 100-degree heat and 100% humidity.
For sure.
Okay, so we see a lot of those people in Houston coming to Napa Valley. We've also seen even the locals. We've seen more kids come to wine tasting because they don't have anywhere to take the kids to.
Oh, interesting.
So it's been, we're all learning, and we've done some different things this year where we've done some Zoom virtual tastings, which have been successful for us. And a lot of wineries have gone to that measure to try to engage. Some have done, you know, recipes, and some have done cheese and wine. We've had Russell on some of the virtual tastings. We're planning to do some. We think that's something that's going to happen, continually happen, to engage people.
Yeah. So we're in an election year. What do you think? What's on your mind about what's going on in the world right now, or in society?
Well, for the one thing in the wine end of it in Napa Valley, our Governor Gavin Newsom is in the wine business. He is a part owner in some of the wineries in Napa Valley. So we think we should get at least a better
of the treatment.
Treatment.
Yeah, sure.
But with the election going on, you know, I try to stay away from politics because, but it's hard to. You know, it's where's the country going to go to?
Sure.
You know, we mentioning higher tax rates in California. Well, you know, back when I started in business with my father-in-law, Don, that was during the Reagan administration. There was a lot of funding available for small business, opportunities for small business. You know, other than what has happened during the COVID, where they've allowed through the PPP situation for small business to get loans and everything, there really hasn't been a mechanism in place to encourage small businesses. We've allowed the Walmarts of the world to drive small business out, and the ones that have survived have barely survived. There's very few businesses in that type of space that can survive Target, the Walmarts, and the food side of it. And so it's, you know, that alone has driven a lot of people to move, sell their businesses, move to Oregon, move to Washington, Nevada, Texas, Arizona. And I think that's where we're having right now is the fallout, as people are just saying is we just can't continue to pay these taxes. There's no advantage for us to stay here. There's no advantage for me to have a small business here. I'm better off trying it somewhere else, packing my boxes and moving. And I think that's going to continue to happen because as we have all of our social programs in California, they have to be funded.
Right.
And so as they get funded, what does that mean? For the taxpayer, those who make some money are going to be paying more money. There's no way around it. There's just no way around it.
Well, doesn't that perpetuate the problem, right? Until there's got to be a breaking point, because if you don't tighten your belt as a state and address some of the either inefficiencies or just overall expenses, you're just going to drive more people out. Because if you make the situation worse, you know, like AB 5 law, if you're familiar with the laws here that changed, it's the anti-gig economy law that killed Uber. And Uber's like, well, we're out then, at least for now. Because you can't just flip a switch and convert everybody to employees and make that work. Doesn't that make the problem worse before it gets better?
I agree. I really think that's people in government, politicians, why they make their decisions, why lobbyists are pushing one way or the other. You know, we need people in there that see what business really translates, right? Sending one family to another state because they can't afford to live here, between the housing, between work.
Right.
That potential person could be a billionaire 10 years from now because he opens up something in another state,
Right.
where California suffers because we kicked that person out when maybe that person could have developed that here.
Right. Well, then you've got this whole virtualization of the economy thing that COVID has been the sick experiment of proving that it's possible to have business with team members all over the country, not showing up to a physical space. And it used to be that the tax base was based on where you lived and you had to live near your work. But this is transformative. You know, all across the nation, it's transformative. If we find some permanence in realizing that a workforce could be substantially remote and accomplish substantially the same outcome.
Well, you know, we have sons and they have wives. Some of them are in a high-tech business. And, you know, I, not being in this space, you know, you read a lot, you hear a lot. You know, most of them now are working remote and have been told at least through the end of the year they'll be working remote, if not till the end of next summer. A lot of people now are thinking about moving. If they can work remote, they can work anywhere.
That's right.
Now, what we've also heard is, which I did not know, that if you work for a big company and you move to a state outside of California, they renegotiate your deal that you have. You're making less money because the cost of living is cheaper. And that's kind of hard for me to swallow. I should be worth what I'm worth and not where I live. And
that's right.
I see that as probably a potential problem down the road for all these businesses, because if you want to attract people, if you're going to be working remotely anyway, does it really matter if you're in Hawaii, California, New Mexico, South Dakota? It shouldn't really matter. You're either producing or you're not producing.
Well, this gets to value theory and subjective theory of value, the Austrian School of Economics issues, and how value theory is beginning to overtake labor theory. Or replace labor theory, which is an industrialized economy concept, which is that it's really based on the cost of labor in different environments rather than the value of the human. And I think we're moving more towards a model, like you're saying, where the intrinsic value of a human and their outcomes, what they can do for you, matter more than some statistic around, you know, what, did you become less valuable just because you moved there? And when you're still talking to customers on the phone all day, remotely anyway. I mean, it's a very interesting thing that companies are going to have to deal with when it comes to understanding compensation models. And it's going to transform, I think it's going to transform cities and secondary and tertiary markets in rural areas where some of them are going to choose value, and they're going to find that there's going to be able to be better diversity and better examples in the socioeconomic scale in every neighborhood soon of people to look up to that are succeeding and performing, that choose to live in a rural area and can. that never could before.
Right. Well, we talked before the show, and that how New York is, real estate in New York, how many people are moving out of New York. We're seeing the same thing in San Francisco, maybe for different reasons today, but they will be the same reasons coming forward. But safety is a major issue.
Major issue.
As we, quote, talk about defunding police, bigger cities are going to have more crime. They're going to be unsafe. And the younger kids' generation live in the big cities because of the entertainment factor, that the restaurants and the nightclubs and everything else. And you're seeing in San Francisco where a lot of exodus of young kids are moving out, buying homes in the rural cities around there, because if they're not going to have that, why do they want to pay these huge rates for rent when they could be buying a place in the rural areas?
Especially if they're not safe.
Yeah, and they can work at home.
So have you talked to your kids? You have 2 sons. Have you talked to your sons about the defund police thing at all?
We have not been able to see our oldest son other than FaceTime.
Okay.
We see our youngest one living in San Francisco, and of course they're in the heart of where a lot of demonstrations are. Defunding police, he would tell you he's totally against it. If there was going to be any defunding, let's make sure that we keep the cities safe.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some programs that don't need the...
Oh, sure, right? I mean,
whatever the budgets are, it's, hey, if someone says to you, hey, you only got 90 cents instead of $1, then you're going to find a way to run your business at 90 cents and be as efficient as you can.
Yeah, absolutely right. Do you know anybody who's for it?
No, I can't say I know anybody that's for it. Now,
Neither
maybe if you're 18 to 30 years old in that group category, where you haven't had to worry about the possessions that you have that you don't want to lose, or you don't want to have any of your family members maybe in jeopardy of some criminal act potentially, maybe you haven't experienced that, or maybe you're too young that, it's not going to happen to me. Right. Maybe that's the group that is more pushing this. But I think that anybody in my age group would say, why would we want to take away our safety net?
Right. Well, we've seen, you were talking about masks earlier, and that sort of it can't happen to me thing, and how college kids are behaving, because some of these colleges are reversing their school openings because of COVID are experiencing spikes. I mean, from 5% positive rates to 1/4, which is crazy. I mean, it's insane. So is that a part of what you're seeing? Is this a feeling of invincibility in younger generation?
It scares me because it goes back to the common sense, right? I mean, if kids question something, why, their common sense should tell them. But if they have grown up without having to deal with making decisions that are common sense decisions, right and wrong, it's good to make wrong decisions to learn from them.
Yeah.
But if you don't make wrong decisions, then your chances of making the right decision become harder.
Yeah. Are you concerned? My wife's Chinese, so she always laughs at we have a thing where we kind of laugh, and she gets to tease white people, right? We all get to have a banter because we don't know, we don't have the SARS thing here, and we don't have this history of having the respiratory diseases and things that come out in Asia, and the Asians are very programmed to deal with this in a certain way. And for us, we're just not. And then we've got this whole freedom thing, which is another thing, right? And it's fascinating to me how that all plays, and how certain systems are what's at play there, right?
Look at New Zealand.
Yeah,
okay?
That's right. That's a great example.
New Zealand, okay? They do tracing, okay? Here in America, oh my God, if you know where I'm at, that's not legally right? And tracing is what has made Germany, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, even in China for the most part, successful in combating a COVID or a COVID-like virus. Right?
She was saying the schools are open in parts of Asia. They'll take a picture in every day of the class, of where the kids are sitting. So every day there's something that's posted to their intranet of which kids were in proximity to the other children, just so it's documented.
Wow.
Pretty wild, right?
Wow.
Yeah. There's good and bad, right? Because as much as there's also challenges with the CCP, there is good in the model, and how there's good and bad in every model, right? It's kind of an interesting thing.
And we're such a diverse country. You know, I've been fortunate to have plants in many states that have different thinkings than other states. Some are very, very conservative, and some are very, very liberal. Yeah. And they don't meet anywhere near where they should be meeting.
That's true. And the cultures are so drastically different, right? Some live in families all in one house all together very closely and have a lot of children by culture, right? And then others just don't even, you know, grandparents don't want to be anywhere. They'd like to visit every once in a while, drop in and then leave, right? You know, and so I think we have that where there isn't a uniculture. Right. You know, in other countries, there's cultural uniformity in ways that we could never accomplish here.
I agree. I mean, everybody says New Zealand is the model, right? Well, first of all, there's not a big population. Yeah. They control who comes in, who goes out. Yeah. And they know where everybody's at. Well,
that's true. They're not exactly attached by a border to any of the people aren't just walking across or jumping the fence or doing whatever, right?
That's correct.
That's great. That's great. Stu, it's been real.
I like it being real.
It's great. I'm glad you came up here. You came down to visit your mom, did you?
Came down to visit my mom down in the Laguna Woods.
It begins and ends with family, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming up today on your way back. It's crush time, as you said you're making it back for crush.
You know, we're going to be, crush is going to be starting, you know, we've got multiple fires in Northern California again. And actually some of the fruit that we buy is, those vineyards have been totally wiped out by this fire going through right now.
No kidding.
And so we're keeping our fingers crossed that the smoke taint, you know, from the smoke, you know, that the fire, the winds will keep pushing it east, because that's something you can't solve. You know, you can do whatever you can. The Australians are the best in the world with smoke taint, but it's still going to be smoke. I mean, you can sell it, hey, do you like that smoky flavor in the wine, right? But it's not supposed to be there.
Oh my gosh, there's going to be smoke. Would there be smoke flavor in the wines? Is that in some cases?
Yeah, in 2017, there was a good percentage of fruit that just was not picked because of the smoke from the...
I think I was there. I think I was at an event in San Francisco, and you could see the smoke in the sky from that fire.
Oh yeah.
I remember that distinctly.
If the smoke is there for 3 to 5 days, you literally need to have the wines taken to a chemical lab, I mean the grapes taken to a chemical lab to see how much smoke taint is on them.
No
and you got to do that for like 5 days in a row.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah.
It's people don't understand what goes into this.
Well, you know,
pretty wild.
You know, when you drive down a road and you see vines, everybody, oh, that's wine. You know, there's a lot more to it than just that. There's so many factors that can go wrong. And you know, if you own a winery or you own an estate, if it's not the deer, it's the wild turkey. If it's not the wild turkey, it's the rabbits. If it's not the rabbits, you know, it's the hogs. If it's not the hogs, it's the birds. And like my wife would say, so are we going to have any fruit left? And it's
you could have retired, Stu.
Well, I did.
And then but you know, with every
I had the itch.
With every sip of this stuff, I'm thankful that somebody rolls their sleeve up and does the work and has the ethic.
It's a passion that I love. That hopefully you yourself and you can bring your family up and your friends to visit Napa Valley. Yeah. It's a beautiful place. But come visit us up on Diamond Mountain. Our Armstrong Ranch is one of the oldest ranches still left in Napa Valley that's still producing phenomenal fruit. So we will look forward to you come visiting us.
You can count on it. I'm going to do it.
Well, I'm counting on it.
Yeah. Well, right. That's a deal.
I'll have a bottle of wine trail every 20 miles. There'll be a bottle there that kind of leads you in the right direction.
The crumb trail. I'll be there to follow the crumb trail. That's fabulous.
But
well, Stu, thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely.
And everybody, Stu Lerner, the Lerner Project. I'm Christopher Marston, your host of CEOs Get Real. Cheers, Stu.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you.